Hello again, gamers and gamettes, and welcome to another episode of Not So Hardcore Gaming. I'm your host, Jeremy, and today we're discussing Forza Motorsport 5. I got this game fairly recently, actually, and usually I quite like racing games, so I was pretty confident about it, and going into it, I have quite a bit to say on it, so I wanted to make it today's episode, just to get everything out there and tell you what I think of it. So without further ado, let's get into it. Starting, as always, visuals and audio. In terms of visuals, we'll start mostly with the background. You know, whenever you're racing around, the first thing you see is the landscape. Well, apart from the car, but the landscape is always changing, and so it's one thing you constantly see. And for this one, there was a nice amount of detail, so don't get me wrong on that. The detail was fairly good for it. Even when you're going at high speeds, it doesn't look too blurry. You get just enough to make it seem fairly realistic, I guess. But the problem that I've come across throughout it is the background gets a bit boring. Everything's sort of the same, and despite looking quite detailed, after a while, if it gets boring, it loses that touch, and that's what I found happened for the most part. That's just going straight into it. It looks good, but after a while you get sick of seeing the same things. Apart from that, you've got the tracks, which, like the road, the different details around the track that you're racing. Again, that was done quite well, and this, I think, was done, I found slightly better than looking at the backgrounds, because each track itself looks different. It's all got a different layout, and it varies, I think, a bit more than the background does. So that part of the visuals, I think, was done just a little bit better. Next, apart from those two, you've got the cars themselves, and a lot of detail was put into the cars, and that's a given. If you're having a car racing game, you have to have detail on the cars, otherwise your game really suffers for it. That's the most important thing. So there was a good amount of detail put into the cars, and for me, I found they looked really good. And that's not just that, it's a cool looking car, but each car had detail. So again, visually, the game looks pretty good. It is quite detailed, and it runs smoothly in terms of visuals. You don't have low frame rates here or there. It doesn't decline for you. So, in terms of detail, and there's not much to complain about. But the thing that I can say just didn't quite hit right was it felt the same after a while. The audio. The car's sounds themselves, I always have two sides to it, and I like to think that the sounds are accurate to what they would sound like in real life, but at the same time, I'm not much of a cars guy. I don't know a lot about cars, so when I listen to a certain car, I can't look at it and say, that's just not quite right, or that sounds exactly like that car would in real life. So I can't speak for that. But I've found the cars, they will sound just a little bit different in terms of revving, and it changes the pitch of the car, the machine itself, as you speed up, which is how it should be. That I do know. The faster you're going, the pitch of the machine will change. And that I found was done fairly well. I think there's even a little bit of echo when you go through certain areas, but that could be me imagining. I cannot actually tell you for sure if that was coded into it. Apart from that, the narration. First of all, there's a female narrator who will tell you about what event you're doing, and I can't speak heavily on her narration because one of the problems that comes with her, even though I have subtitles on, when she talks there are no subtitles, and so I don't retain a lot of what she says. That's why I will always have the subtitles on, is because it helps me remember what they're saying a bit better, and it helps me concentrate on what they're saying better. And for her, there are no subtitles, which is not a good thing. Then you have Jeremy Clarkson from Top Gear. And don't get me wrong, he has a nice voice for narrating. Like, it's not a bad voice to listen to. But the thing I think frustrates me about it is you are unable to skip his narration. And that, just off principle, loses points. Again, it's not that he sounds bad, but he gets a bit boring after a while. And I've found 90% of the time when he's talking, I just zone out because I just get bored. And if you cannot skip something like that, it's just not right. And I can understand if it's a race loading that you have a narrator telling you about it, so you've got something to listen to while the race loads. But when he's talking, he's just talking about the types of car you're using without actually having to load anything. Because you've got different leagues that you go into, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. And he'll talk about the types of cars in it. And that's before you even get to select a race. So that there's no need to have him narrating the whole thing. And you should always be able to skip that option. And I can't. So that loses points in my eyes. I know that may be a bit nitpicky, but I'm just not a fan of that type of thing, forcibly making you listen to something. That's about all the aspects of visuals and audio together. For the most part, they're good, but for this one, I do have complaints. And yeah, it's not bad, but it could definitely be better on both fronts. To use something that I think plays into the visuals, just as a nicer segue as they fit together, customization options. Now, each car obviously looks different, and that's just a basic. When you go to customize it, you have two options that you can do. You can create your own design, or you can use other racers' designs that they uploaded. And when you're doing your own designs, don't get me wrong, there are a lot of different options for the designs, but at the same time, some of them are just meh. You know, they're not great. And it's a bit disappointing as well, because you have different tabs for what you can select, and half of the pages of designs are just different fonts of writing. And I haven't seen anybody who wants to just write sentences on their car, like full words on their car, because that's just not something you see done, because that's boring. And it's disappointing that they invested so heavily into having all these weird fonts for the words when I haven't seen anybody use them. And I sure as hell will never use them. So that was a bit disappointing that made up over half of the designs. And then the other thing, you've got different types of designs. You've got simple ones like regular shapes. You've got gradients that you can put on. But when I look at most of the designs, I just don't see a way I could work it into a design that I'm comfortable looking at for a while. And that could be more of a detriment to my creativity. I can't find something that I think looks good. But at the same time, it's just the customization options seemed a bit lacking for me. So there wasn't as much that I could enjoy for it. And it's just a bit of a shame. The other way I do look at it, though, is there are a lot of different combinations that you could make. So, it's a bit on both sides. There's not a lot I can find that will be massively different, but at the same time, with the amount that you have, there are many different combinations, rather. So there's a bit on both sides. There's a lot of different things you could do using different designs, different colors, all combined together. But I just felt a bit disappointed looking at it. Then when you go to the public designs that people make, I don't know how they make half of them. There was one design on one of the first cars I got where they had this wolf on it. I have no idea how they did that. I can't see any option for that unless they're using things uploaded by other people, designs, that individual designs, and then they combine it on their own. But I wish I knew how they did that, because then I feel like the customization would be a lot more exciting and I'd be able to do a lot more. But looking at it as it is now, for me, for what I know I can do, it just disappoints me a little bit. But the designs themselves were detailed. They were smooth. So I think graphically they were put in well. They were coded well to look good. But they just didn't tickle my fancy, so to speak. I don't know. I know I may sound contradictory there, but I'm a bit split on that one, so just a little bit split on it. Yeah, I don't know. So yeah, as it's a complicated thing to talk about for me, really, is, and a lot of times when I'll look at a game, I'm split on a few different things about it. But for this one, I can't heavily complain, but I can't heavily compliment. Moving on to the next one, the cars themselves. There are a lot of different car options for it. It's not as extensive as a lot of other games I've played. So it is a bit disappointing in the grand scheme, but when sorted into different leagues, it sort of makes more sense. You can't have 100 different options for one league and then move on to another one. So I can understand it a little bit, but at the same time, I would have liked to have seen more. And then we get to the issue of licensing. And whenever I come up with a criticism about a game, I like to try and understand their point of view. And for them to be able to make these games, they have to pay licensing to the manufacturers of the cars. And when that is the case, there's only so much you can do. You know what I mean? So I would have liked to see more car options for it, but I can understand why they couldn't get every car in it. Then the cars themselves, as I said, they look fairly good. Some of them already come with a design on them, and some of them are a blank slate, so you've got quite a bit to work with. And then you can use the same car, so if you get along with one particular car, you like the controls for it, and it's a low league car, you can use it to race in that league, and then by upgrading, the gameplay doesn't change much, so you can continue with the car you like, and then make it to a few different leagues, if that makes sense. Which I think works well. I like being able to do that, to stick with one car, if you want to, whereas you can have the room to use other cars as soon as you want, and having that freedom is good. Yeah. Then, some of the problem I have with it, and for all of these, I have bits I'll compliment and bits I didn't like, and normally I don't have as many criticisms with other games, but for this one, some of them just, there was something that bothered me, and that's why I wanted to make this episode. It's one of the first games I've played where I've genuinely seen some flaws in it. I'm not usually the type of guy to see that. And the problem I have with some of the cars is, first of all, you can't sell your cars in this game. That, to me, is immediately a bad thing. Because you can remove the cars from your garage, and they're just gone. Why have the option to remove them without getting anything back? That, to me, didn't make sense, and I think that is a very bad thing. You know, because in other games, if you've got two different cars from the same league, like the same type of car, but one of them is slower, you can sell that so you can afford another better car, if that makes sense. And then it gives you more freedom to work with it, to change your inventory, to try new things. And this one, you can't do that. And then what plays into it otherwise is, in terms of gameplay, which I'll get into a bit more, when you go to higher league races, the amount you win doesn't increase. And that, I think, makes it so much worse that you can't sell your cars, because it takes you a while to save up for them. And if you're in a much higher league, you know, you're using better cars, and you're only making the same amount you would have made at the D level, it gets disappointing because you have to race so much more. And while it gives you, more reason to continue playing the game, after a while it becomes a chore, because you think, I need to, for this one, I'm making 7,000 per race, and I need 1.4 million. That's 200 races you have to go through to save up for it. And that takes a long time. If each race is between 4 and 8 minutes, that is a hell of a lot of playing time just to afford one high-grade car. And that has actually been the biggest problem I had with this game. I haven't seen a game do that before. And the reason is, nobody likes it when you do that. So, that, as it plays in with the cars, the prices are, for some of them they're reasonable, some of them they are extremely pricey, and the game doesn't help you get them. It doesn't give you what you need for them. Very, very disappointing for that. And yeah, it's something I'm really glad they've changed in other games for it. So now that I've gone through all of the stuff related to the cars, I'll talk about the leagues themselves, because I mentioned that just then. There are a lot of different leagues, and I use that word, they probably use competitions. They're different categories that you race in. I just tend to call them leagues. I can't really explain why, but there are a lot of different options there. You've got, first of all, your classes, which comes under gameplay as well. You've got D class, then you go C, B, A, S, R, P, I believe. And that ranges from the lowest level cars to the highest level ones. But then you've got other ones, which there's leagues dedicated to just muscle cars, and one that I don't quite understand, you've got ones for like the Beetles, like those Beetle cars. That to me has always been a weird option. Having to race in what is widely known as one of the crappiest cars ever. That's a whole nother thing for me, but that's just one thing. Makes me laugh a little bit. But I do like the option of having all the different leagues, which gives you a taste of everything. It is a good design for it, but it has its flaws, as I said. So the biggest thing with the leagues is the winning's not changing, and that takes quite a bit away from it. But the leagues themselves, I like having so many options, and there really are a lot of options for you to go through. It means that if you are a dedicated player, then you have a lot you can do. But for me, I guess I just didn't get into it as much, so I haven't done everything. And moving on to the last bit, gameplay. I saved this for last. To be honest, I'm not 100% sure. But it felt like the right way to go, talking about things in this order. The gameplay itself is fairly extensive for it. First of all, you've got your simple racing mechanics, The button layout is done quite well for it. It's the same layout as really any other game you come across, but that's just because if it ain't broke, don't fix it, The game, depending on which car you use, also changes quite a lot, and going at high speeds, I think it's coded quite well. This also comes under customization for it as well, is you can customize your car to have different powers, and by buying certain upgrades you can change your gearing to be more geared towards acceleration or something like that. And the fact that this has a good variation on the gameplay itself is good. Very good. It gives you the chance to change your playstyle to something that fits you. And the fact that it's minor variations is good. You don't want to have one little thing which changes the whole gameplay mechanic drastically, if that makes sense. So, the subtle differences, I think, they did well. It's one of the things that this game did best. It's the upgrades themselves for the cars was one of the most extensive parts of the game as well. There are a lot of different options you can go with, and then the upgrades changing what league it is in. That actually got a bit frustrating for me after a while. But I guess it makes sense, you can't have a really powerful car and still be in D-League. But sometimes it's difficult finding the right upgrade to get the most out of it while remaining in the same league, if that makes sense. So, as well as that, they have very long descriptions for each thing, and if you want to be able to change your car to be able to increase your downforce, to take tighter corners, that sort of thing, you have to go and find the upgrade. And if you don't have a good memory like me, I have a shocking memory. So anytime I wanted to go with a new car and find the right upgrade to then increase the downforce, I had to reread everything until I found the right one. And that just becomes a chore after a while. So it's just another case there where I can understand it to a degree, but it does get frustrating and it does take away from it after a while. And then the other problem is you have very limited customization for the controls of your car itself, because when you buy one upgrade to be able to change one part of it, it increases your car's rating quite a lot. and it means that you can only do a little bit if you want to remain in the same league. So you can only change one or two things if you want to stay forward, like if you're a completionist. So that got frustrating quite quickly, and it was very frustrating after a while. Then when you get to higher speeds with your cars, for some reason during this game, it didn't feel as exciting as other games. When you're going at 210, that's a fairly fast speed. But for this game, going at 210 felt like a light stroll. It didn't feel fast. And it wasn't until you reached like 260 kilometers per hour that you felt, oh, that's pretty fast. And it just wasn't as exciting. And that's really such a shame. When you are racing a car, you want it to feel exciting. You want to be able to go, God, that's fast. It exhilarates you. This didn't hit right for me. And that is one of the other most disappointing things for it. It didn't feel as exciting. On the podcast previously, I've spoken about Forza Horizon. And that was a game that did it very well. And while I try not to make too many comparisons to other games during it, I like to try and look at each game individually. But I found some of this stuff didn't feel as good, whereas Forza Horizon did it very well. And I'm pretty sure it's the same people making it. It's just such a difference with it. And the other bit, which is a thing that was actually brought up, which I'd been a bit on the edge about, is you feel constricted for this. In a game such as Forza Horizon or a lot of other racing games, it gives you the chance to drive around on your own without actually racing. For this one, there is only racing. You don't get the freedom to just go around at your own pace, that sort of thing. And it gets a bit boring after a while. I found myself drifting away, and I would have to stop playing it for a while because I just felt bored. And I know I've used this word a few times, but that's disappointing. You want to have a game that keeps you engaged and keeps you playing more. This didn't do it for me. This was the one I had to play in installments because I got too bored. Then, another thing I wanted to comment on, which is to do with the gameplay as well, I have always disliked the gameplay mechanic of, oh, your car is too good, or you have to downgrade it. When it comes to certain leagues, like I was mentioning with the D rank class, the B ranks, all of that, I can understand it. You have to have a car with that ranking. But then when you go to a completely different league, like the muscle cars, it doesn't tell you your requirement. It doesn't tell you, oh, this is the maximum rating you can have. So you go in with a fairly upgraded car and it says, oh no, your car's too good, you got to downgrade it. I've always hated that. I can understand you need to have it be challenging, otherwise it's too easy and a lot of people can get bored that way. But I think forcing you to downgrade your car for ones like that is the wrong way about going about it, In other games that I've played, what they will do is, if you have a higher ranked car, it'll be like, alright, cool, that's fine. You can use your fast car, but we're going to upgrade your opponents to give you that challenge. I'm like, sweet, okay, let's do that. Because then I can still enjoy the high speed. I can enjoy the powerful car while still having that challenge. But for this, having to downgrade always disappointed me. And then the even more annoying bit is it would always cost you to downgrade. And when you're making so little money from the races, that gets annoying fast. because you spend the money to upgrade it, then it wants you to buy different parts to get it down automatically. And having to spend more on it, even if it's just a small amount, it gets annoying. And I've played multiple different leagues with multiple different types of cars, and every single time it has made me change my car's configuration. That just irks me to no end. So, all of this that I've said, it doesn't necessarily mean that the game is bad. I just found the game wasn't for me, and I think there was a lot they could have improved. So I've said quite a bit on flaws that I think the gameplay contains, but I would like to finish off with one thing I think the gameplay did very well. The ranking system for the races. In any other racing game I've played, it's first, second, or third, and after that, nothing. For this one, at least on the levels I've been playing it gives you a bit more room. If you place from in first, second, or third, you get gold for that race. And then I think from like 4th to 7th or 8th, you get silver, and after that, bronze. That I found was actually quite well done, because when you're doing a race, what can happen if you're in first, right at the last second you have someone overtake you, and when you do that, it's so frustrating. But for this, it gives you a bit more room for that, so that if you do get taken over at the last second, overtaken, I apologize. If it is right at the last second, you still get that gold because you still placed high. I quite like that game mechanic. So that was one thing that it did very well. I commend them on that. I thought that was a very good way to go about it, and it was unique. Very, very unique. I haven't seen any other game do that. That's most what I had to say on it. Overall, for this game, I think that there's quite a bit it did right, but I feel there was a lot of flaws in it. And that can happen, We're human. The people who make the games, they're human too. They do things wrong. So I can't say, oh, it's a terrible game. I just found there was a lot of bits to it that I didn't quite like. If I were to give it a rating of 1 to 10, I'd say probably 6.5, or thereabouts. I think it is definitely above average, but there are a lot of things that it could have improved on. And hopefully at some point soon I can get a later Forza Motorsport and see if it changed much of that. And yeah, as I said, I can't be overall mad about it. I can't say, oh, it was terrible. But it was flawed. Nonetheless, and I will always say this for any game, I do recommend giving it a go. For any game that exists out there, I would always recommend trying it for yourself, because everybody is different, and it is a person-to-person thing. If I don't enjoy it, you might enjoy it. So I will still always recommend to try it. And if you do, you might enjoy it. So I hope you will try it. And maybe you can say, oh, I agreed with you on this, or I disagreed with you on that. I love to discuss these things, so I'd love to hear your opinion on it. And that brings us to the end of the episode. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I will definitely be seeing you again soon. Have a good one.